from that. All right, let's talk the first game of the day, Rose Bowl, the granddaddy of them all, Alabama, Michigan. Line is at 1.5. Michigan is the current favorite. Over under sitting at 45.5. The number might be a little different depending on where you're looking at this game. But let's talk the first side of the ball, which I think offers up some challenges, and that is the Alabama offense versus the Michigan defense. I think when we talk about this game, there's a lot of people that will bring sort of the accounting stats into this, and I think there needs to be a little bit more nuance to that because the Michigan defense has not faced anything close to the athlete they will see in Jalen Milroe. And this is an Alabama offense that is certainly down this year compared to what we have come accustomed to with this team. I mean, this is a team currently sitting, right now outside the top 50 in yards per game, outside the top 50 in passing yards per game, 47th in rushing yards per game. They're sitting outside the top 15 in points per game, outside the top 20 in EPA per pass, outside the top 40 in EPA rush. Like, this is a unit compared to the past iterations of Alabama is certainly down comparatively. We've talked about this over the course of the season. The wide receiver room is certainly not the same that we've become accustomed to out of this Alabama side. The quarterback room certainly doesn't have, a Jalen Hurts or a Tua in there. Jalen Milroe has certainly developed nicely, I think, as the season has gone on, but there's still some question marks there. The offensive line is certainly down, and you're going against a Michigan team that has not faced an athlete like they have in Jalen Milroe, but is extremely good at a lot of places. And I think the first kind of area that sticks out to you when you watch the film, when you watch the tape, when you watch the games, is this Michigan defensive line. It is deep. It is talented. They can rotate a lot of bodies in. And this is a mismatch opportunity potentially that they can take advantage of. I think Kirby Smart, laid out a pretty good game plan from a defensive standpoint that I'll be interested to see if Michigan employs a very similar game plan. And that's one that, you're looking to take away the deep ball because Jalen Milroe has been an absolute assassin at the deep ball past 20 yards or more. And try to make him work the intermediary side of the field. When you rewatch that Georgia game, as I've done, you see a lot of guys running underneath, virtually open. But Jalen Milroe right now hasn't fully developed that intermediary passing game. It's certainly come along better, especially in the last 5 games of the season. Really, since that LSU game, you've seen the offense really start to buzz a little bit more. Part of that is because Jalen Milroe has become more of a runner, which has opened up another layer to this Alabama offense. But we saw a lot of guys in that Alabama wide receiver room running open. And I don't know if Michigan necessarily has the secondary to do exactly the same thing Georgia did. Georgia's secondary is better for sure, I think. But the defensive line is really where a mismatch comes. And I think that interior part, both Alabama's interior lines, I think are a weak spot in sort of the area that we're going to try to see Michigan when they do bring pressure. Or try to isolate their pressure, it's going to be in that interior part of the line, attacking the center position and those 2 guards for Alabama. I think the game plan will be relatively simple. Keep Jalen Milroe in the pocket. Keep a spy on him. Try to take away the deep ball and try to make him work intermediary, middle of the field type of stuff because he hasn't shown a consistency yet that really makes you feel threatened there in that game plan. Michigan will certainly have its hands full, I think, defensively if they don't do that, because we've seen this Michigan defense struggle with more mobile quarterbacks. They haven't faced a ton, but when they have this season, it's certainly exposed some elements of this defense. So that will be certainly an interesting matchup. I think when you flip the field and you get this Michigan offense versus this Alabama defense, Zinter is certainly a concern because he is out. And the Michigan offensive line is down comparatively, I think, to last year. This is a team that I think will certainly look to run the ball and control the clock that way. Neither one of these teams is really designed to play from behind, so it's going to be really important that whoever gets out to an early lead, probably going to hold it. This Michigan offense has not seen a secondary quite like this. This is an elite level secondary that Alabama brings to the game. And they get hands on you and they force you to do something at the line. And outside of Wilson, there hasn't been a guy that has really stood out in the Michigan wide receiver room, I don't think. I'm going to be very interesting. I think a guy, let's flag this now, maybe a little, if your state offers prop bets and players. Donovan Edwards is a guy. He's dealt with some lower body injuries this season. He hasn't had that same kind of pop he did in years past, but he's had 30 days off. If he has that ability, that pop to be isolated on linebackers in the passing game, that could really open up something here for Michigan. Like that could be the one of the X factors. I think the other is McCarthy's ability to be mobile and be a part of this run game. But I think Donovan Edwards has got to play a role in the passing game to really unlock something here, because I don't think the Michigan wide receivers are going to win a lot of one-on-one battles on the outside. I think you have a better opportunity here if Edwards can kind of return to a version of himself we'd seen, last year prior to these lower body injuries he has sustained, because he needs that. And then you have Blake Corum, obviously a bruiser inside. The offensive line hasn't been as great, but I do think that Alabama's defense along that line, they're outside the top 30 in yards allowed per rush attempt, outside the top 25 in first downs gained by the rush. So this is a defense, I think, especially in the internal part of that defensive line, you can have success against. And they have certainly played better. They played a lot better in the Georgia game, for sure, the defense. But this is a unit that we've talked about over the course of the season that has struggled at times, I thought. And the element that everybody's aware of, everybody's going to be talking about, is when you have a mobile quarterback. JJ McCarthy obviously has been dealing with some injuries, and we don't know the extent to which those injuries have been affecting him, but I think it's pretty obvious when you watch that his lower body mechanics have fallen apart a bit during this time period. He's been less willing to run and be mobile. I think he's going to have to be if Michigan wants to find success offensively, because I do wonder about the tackle's ability to maintain their responsibilities against these Alabama edge players who are good and can kind of get after you a little bit here. I think that if, Sherrone Moore elects to use McCarthy a little bit more as a designated runner, that could unlock something here. They've got to be able to run the ball. They've got to find an X factor, whether it's Donovan Edwards lined up against a linebacker and getting him out in the passing game, or JJ McCarthy being a more willing runner to get something here. Because once again, I have legit concerns that there's not going to be that ability to win the one-on-one battles on the outside against that secondary that has been very, very good. And I think, as we said before, or I've said before, on when you flip it, we just talked about it. Jalen Milroe has got to be more consistent on the humanitarian throw. I think the ceiling is certainly higher for the Alabama team. Both these teams are capable of winning a national championship, but in a year where there isn't really a dominant team, we've seen more parity through college football this year. Every team in the college football is capable of winning the national championship, obviously. Both these teams do not want to get behind, because both these teams do not play great from behind. Alabama certainly has a little bit more of an ability here. I do like, you've also got the Rose Bowl, which has been an over success from a betting standpoint. It's a fast track. I kind of like an over here. Maybe a Michigan money line opportunity. I grabbed Alabama. I got them at 2.5 when the lines opened. At a spot, the line has come down a little bit. But at this point in time, Jalen Milroe certainly is the guy that, man, if he can get going, it can get ugly quickly. Yeah, I think the play from a betting standpoint is probably an over. Maybe a cheap Michigan money line, maybe. But we'll see. It's going to be a very, very interesting matchup. I don't think either one of these teams has like a great edge over it. Like I'm not as strong of an opinion on a winner here as I am maybe in the Texas-Washington game, because I do think these teams match up extremely well for what they both want to try to accomplish. It's just which X factor is going to, be the game changer here. I tend to lean a little bit more to the Michigan side from being able to control the game. That defensive line is really good. I think Georgia rolled out a very good blueprint for Michigan's defense to follow. I don't think the narrative that like, oh, well, Nick Saban's only lost one time since the BCS era when he's had a month to prep. It's not like Michigan's coaching staff is a bunch of idiots. Like, this is a well put together coaching staff. Alabama did hire the linebackers coach from Michigan to help handle with this game. But these are competent coaching staffs. They match up really well. The Zinter injury could be significant for Michigan's offensive line that has certainly struggled. We've seen a decrease in yards before contact this season from them. They're hovering right around like 2 yards. Last year, I want to say it was like 2.45, I want to imagine. So about a half, a yard on average before contact down this year. There's less of a push, but Alabama's defensive line has shown an ability to be pushed around at times. I think Alabama is certainly, if you get the team that has shown itself post-bye last 5 weeks of the season, where they really had a strong increase, nearly, I think, 100 yards in total offense, almost more than 10 points more per game than they had in the early part of the season. They've really started to come along. If you get that side of it, okay, yeah, I can see the case for Alabama. I think the other thing that I flagged too is Blake Corum was talking about, how this year's prep was a little different. They still practice hard, but not in the same way, to try to bring more juice to this game, because last year they felt they didn't have the juice coming into the game last year. So that is also something. I think the rest side helps Michigan more than it does Alabama. Is the long-winded way that I was trying to get around that. I think ultimately that the rest period has helped Michigan more in kind of getting back into its groove, maybe helping Donovan Edwards there, Blake Corum a little bit more pop, JJ McCarthy obviously getting healthier. Like, I think that favors Michigan. I like the over more. I like the over more at 45 than I do one side, but I say, I got to pick a side. You're making me pick a side. It's about a coin flip, but I'll go Michigan. I don't think there's a crazy edge there. Let's talk about my favorite game, Texas, Washington, because this is an awesome matchup. Like, this game, French kiss, beautiful thing right here. Lines at 4, over under 63.5. We've seen a little bit of a battle on